Welcome to the Tourism Hub podcast, a podcast devoted to you and your excellence, providing inspiration and education for the entrepreneurs, experience makers, and excellent seekers of our industry to take your tourism business and career to a whole new level. And I am your host, Despina Karatius.
Relax.
Hello, good evening, and welcome to another exciting episode of the Tourism Hub podcast. I'm thrilled that you're joining us this evening or morning or afternoon, whatever time you've tuned in from in the day. Thank you to everyone that's joining us live and joining the recording. Now, Tourism Hub, it started as an opportunity to really inspire excellence from leaders in our industry. And my guest this evening is exactly that, a real leading light from a national level with a wealth of experience under his hat. So I'll get straight into it to introduce our guest with you tonight. We have the Executive Director from Australian Tourism Industry Council. He's also the Strategy Director at Royce Com. His name is Simon Westaway, and as the Executive Director of ATIC, he's held this position for over a year now. Now, with Simon, he certainly brings over 25 years of senior executive experience inside some of Australia's most prominent companies, including Qantas, Tourism Australia, and even BHP. Made a major impact in roles around Australia's visitor economy and also a senior manager at regional airline where he was the executive head of corporate relations and the member of the startup executive for Jetstar Airways for 7.5 years during its formative development from early 2004. So I've been really excited for everyone that joined us. This is it was really worth bringing him back. And welcome to the Tourism Hub podcast, Simon Westaway. Yay! Hello, Simon.
G'day,
Hi.
Christina. Lovely to chat on a decent NBN. So I'm a big fan of NBN. So
Yes, thank you so much. I mean, thank you for coming back. It is delightful to have you, and I know you're a very busy man, so I appreciate it. And it is lovely that we've got the NBN connection this evening. Now, you have looking at your background, you started in the beginning with a strong academic background in Asian studies and communications. I just wanted to go through again with you. What was it from calling you to study Asian studies and communications that really carved out your career in tourism and the visitor economy?
Well, thanks for the opportunity. G'day, listeners. Look, it's interesting. I mean, we all travel through our life, don't we? And we all have different experiences. I think for me, where I felt like there was a connection, and was really post my studies, to be honest. You didn't talk about my CV. I was a political advisor and a political strategist for many years as a very young man, and you went through some of my previous roles, and my gosh, I've got a few years under my belt now. What I found is particularly working in a regional airline setting. So I worked for a great regional airline called Impulse Airlines, and some of you may have heard of them, some of you may not have. But and the shell of Impulse became Jetstar, which is why I got involved in the Jetstar project. But Impulse was quite a sizable regional airline. It was connected to Ansett, so bringing back some old names there, and we had a commercial alliance with Ansett, and that was slowly pulling apart at the seams. And the owners of Impulse, it was a privately owned company and family owned, and they'd have been thinking for a long time now about how they could sort of ape and mirror what was going on in Europe with Ryanair, and quite obsessed with the way Southwest Airlines was developing. And I think at the time, in the late 1990s, leading into the 2000 Olympics, and that period, I think there was a view that the aviation industry did really need a bit of a change and a shake-up. Governments have been trying over the years to stimulate the industry by changing the way slots were done at Sydney Airport without getting too boring, providing incentives for foreign ownership in airlines. And ultimately what came out of it was that a regional player, Impulse, created a domestic startup airline. So they did an organisation called Virgin. And so we went from having 2 airlines to 4 in the year 2000. It was around the time of the Olympics. It was all a very heady period. And we got off to a pretty good start. But airlines are very cash hungry, capital hungry. During 2001, the business started to struggle. There was a bit of a dip in the economy after the Olympic hubris sort of faded away. And Impulse folded and went into ultimately became Jetstar in later years. But to your question, I think why the connection, as I did a lot of work in Impulse, we were flying to a lot of very small communities, and I just saw the critical importance of a regional air service going into a township of 10,000 people. We used to fly to places like Glen Innes, Kempsey, Cooma. Now, then in Cooma, we called Cooma the Snowy Mountains Airport. It was a fair way away from Thredbo and Perisher. For us, we created it as a destination, if you like, or an access point to a destination. So I started to really get to understand how the tourism piece, as I used to call it, used to connect in with the transport piece. And I guess that's where my interest in the regional engagement, regional development, and how air transport supports tourism and vice versa. And having grown up in a regional setting, I guess I've sort of always had that affinity around it. So that's really how that journey started. And to be honest with you, I mean, airlines are fantastic. Everyone loves airlines. Maybe not so much at the moment because they're pretty hard places to be if you've got a job. But I actually, over the years, got more enjoyment out of the tourism aspect sometimes than I did the aviation aspect, if I could be brutally honest with you. So, yeah, look, I think it was just an opportunity. I'd be a fantastic opportunity to go work at Tourism Australia. It's an amazing organisation which has done fantastic things for our country. And, look, it's just really, really fantastic time in my life to be able to do that. And I've now been fortunate enough to be able to come back in and advocate for industry as part of a consulting practice.
Incredible. And we're very fortunate for that. Seeing now, just with your aviation hat on, seeing what the effects of COVID already, I mean, early on, Virgin was impacted from COVID. Do you have a level of concern over our own big airline brands like Qantas that like, where do you see that headed? Is there a deep concern there for aviation in Australia coming out of this?
No, it's a great question. Look, aviation's been devastated. Look, I do have a concern about where it's going at the moment. I'm a much more upbeat this afternoon, to be honest, because South Australia have confirmed that they're going to open up to New South Wales. And that's, to be honest, that's a pretty strategic decision. The day that New South Wales had no community transmission for COVID within the state, according to their chief medical officer, South Australia came out and said we're opening up. And I think we're going to see a bit of a domino effect start to occur now. It's very strategic by SA. I'm really pleased and proud of the people inside the state that have worked really hard to push this from an industry perspective, but also the SATC, the Tourism Commission, and, quite frankly, the Premier of SA has been really focused on this. Now, that's not to say that the New South Wales Premier has done a fantastic job to try to keep borders open. And it's a controversial issue, borders, but the point being is if borders are closed, people can't travel and move about, and it has a social and economic and, quite frankly, a political impact. And we've seen the political and probably economic impacts playing out, not so much the social impacts. But, yeah, look, I think hopefully we'll start to see some breakage of these false walls. We may have to wait until after the Queensland state election at the end of October before we see some proper movement there. But, yeah, this would be real positive. If we do not get borders open, particularly domestically in the next few months, it's going to be a really tough stretch for the carriers. And, probably sadly Qantas included. I mean, Qantas have really, really tried to cut the cloth to suit the times. They've dropped out of some major sponsorships today, as they've announced. They're doing everything they can, I think, to hang in there. And look, they will. They've got a great balance sheet, but that balance sheet's obviously been seriously tested. Interesting to see how Virgin goes with the new ownership, the new private equity owners, and Rex Airlines earlier this week reminds me a lot of the Impulse days of raising some money and wanted to kick off with a domestic carrier next year. So, yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how they go in that market. But look, if the borders stay pretty restricted, well, it's going to be tough times for the carriers.
tough times for carriers and translating to the wider industry when we see not just tourism, we've got our hospitality and certainly our entertainment and events industry that really all kind of fall under that same umbrella. Now, your work with the Australian Tourism Industry Council, for any small business that may not have awareness around ATIC, just explain the purpose of ATIC and what you are really working towards on the bigger picture for our industry. Anyone new in their career or business looking at just have an understanding of what the role of Australian Tourism Industry Council is.
Oh, well, fantastic. Thanks for the advertisement. So, yeah, look, I'd love to talk a little bit about the tourism industry councils. And I think one really important takeout, if anyone gets anything out of this tonight, is I think whatever industry you're in, but we're obviously talking in the tourism and visitor and leisure economy, is that you should participate in industry associations. Now, some of them are run better than others. I've previously run a national industry body before, obviously, my role now at ATIC. And industry bodies actually do a lot of really heavy lifting and really help industry and can be a great interface with government. So ATIC is the federated umbrella of the state and territory tourism industry council. So in Victoria, we have got Victorian Tourism Industry Council. In Tassie, it's the Tourism Industry Council of Tassie, and TIC SA, and around we go. And ATIC has three assets, as I like to say. We run and manage the Australian Tourism Awards, which are held annually. Sadly, we won't be having them next year due to COVID. We made a very difficult decision to put them on hold for a year while the industry tries to reset. But they're very critical and a benchmark, obviously, for industry. We have a national accreditation program, the Quality Tourism Framework, which you've got on the site there. Now, that's everything from entry level in terms of how you construct your tourism business enterprise, how you get into business with some resilience backing around it, through to China readiness and so forth. We've got a very successful COVID clean module, which we've introduced in recent months. So we've got ahead of the curve of industry there, and fantastic feedback and interest into that. And then the third area, we have a star ratings program, which is incorporated into our quality tourism framework offering, and businesses can be star rated around Australia. And one may think, how does that survive against a TripAdvisor or some of the other models out there? Well, actually, quite well. And it's a localized method of providing some genuine ratings around your offering. Yeah, look, that's the broader national offering, which is then obviously delivered at a state, and that's delivered at a state level. I have a specific role around policy and advocacy, federal government engagement and regulatory engagement. We've upped the ante there in the last 12 to 18 months, and I wasn't thinking I'd come in and have a quiet time. I've come in, and a couple of months later, we had the bushfire storms, which are horrendous in a number of the states, particularly Victoria, New South Wales, South Australia, parts of Queensland, and then of course we had this little virus. And a quick funny story about that. I came back. I was actually over in Europe with the family, did a big Europe trip, and the fires were going ballistic, and I was doing media interviews every night from London, basically, and trying to get a feel for it. And my mates texted me all the time. It was just terrible. But then I got back, and literally 2 days after I got back in Melbourne, I read on just a website about this virus in China, and I rang a tourism mate. So, have you heard about this? And he's going, "Oh yeah, I have." But he says, there's always viruses in China. I wouldn't think too much of it. And I sort of curiosity got the better of me, and I did a few other calls, and a few people said actually it's quite serious, and but we think it's in check. And then within days, it obviously the real news got out, and the rest is, as I say, is history. So it's been 2020 has been all about the bloody virus. So
the virus. And speaking of China, I think these significant dates, particularly for any operator or business or leader that worked closely with the China market, when that news hit of the virus, and then the borders shutting to groups first, then it kind of happened with the China. So I was certainly at the forefront of that. With your background in the China market and that political exposure. Where do you see that recovery for the China market? Because I know the China market, and even for Australian Chinese businesses that are really suffering at the moment. Where do you see that type of recovery coming back? Because there's kind of international borders opening up, but for us to experience, like to go back to pre-COVID for China, that was quite an abundant market for many businesses. What are your thoughts around there?
Well, it's been an incredible market, and there was very fortunate Tourism Australia. We got to develop and drive the strategy around China. Now, Success has many partners, and so it wasn't TA. We're just realising how big the market could become, and it was just having a broader national strategy, Tourism 2020, and working with the various stakeholders and obviously tiers of government to help deliver that. And the former Tourism Minister Martin Ferguson really needs to be congratulated for that. The strategy that he's very determined to see happen, and TA was the driver behind getting that over the line. And I'm a big believer in strategy and a big believer in longer term plans, not because it's about throwing a ball around the room and sounding strategic, but because it provides a guiding light for industry and for investors and so forth. But I think the China success was amazing. I mean, at its peak, we got to about almost 12.5 billion in international tourism receipts per annum. The spend was 3 times the next largest international market value, which was the US. Obviously, it was more visitors came from China physically in a year than New Zealand. So when you start to add that up, it's been an incredible story. Lots of Chinese, the Chinese carriers came here, obviously led mainly by China Southern. I was very fortunate to engage a lot with the China Southern airline through my time in Qantas, and then also in terms of Tourism Australia. So look, it was right through the airport's engagement, the way regions really adapted. A lot of businesses got China ready and became China focused and became pivoted to China. I hate using that word pivoted, but they basically took the business opportunity, and as we know, in different parts of the country embrace China and the Chinese visitor, and they embraced it, and we see huge success. Now you're spot on. From that first week in February, many businesses that were China exposed, or predominantly China businesses, in terms of their trade, dropped like a stone. And there's too many sad stories to go through. Obviously, know a number of the examples personally, and I just feel for them because they worked very hard on a business model, targeted a market which was engaged with our country to visit, and their high-spending leisure tourists, initially chasing flags as groups, but obviously that FOT market came through. And a lot of people don't realise this. Australia was the second country in the world that got that, in essence, an FIT, an independent traveller visa arrangement. So we've always, from all the way back through governments for many, many years, various colours, the engagement in China has always been very strong. Now, I know it's not fantastic at the moment, the optics, and I don't really want to commentate on that. I'm no more the web than the next person, but I'm actually quite optimistic that the Chinese market will actually come back pretty strongly. It'll take a while to get back to the numbers we're at, but I do think, as you say, there's enough Chinese Australians, there's enough genuine interest for the Chinese in this market. There's a lot of investment that they have, and they do see the value of the leisure dollar being spent down here. So I'm actually probably more glass half full on China than numbers of others, but I could be proven wrong.
Oh, look, I share the same sentiment, and we've got Nikos, who's actually, it's wonderful to have you on to see your name, Nikos. Nikos is actually from the United Nations World Tourism Organization over in Madrid, who I've met, and I like his questions. Is that something like what, I guess, from now moving forward from a strategic level, is that something that is sitting at is that a conversation at ATIC level of how do we support industry tackle an overdependence in the future on a market like China or any other market? What will be the lessons industry wide in taking that real force, like it's an emerging market, invest in the trade missions. We were involved in pounding the pavement and investing in the travel to go in market in China. What would be some takeaways from this? Is that something we would do again in future?
Yeah, it nailed the question. It's a great question. Look, I think you would never have knocked back the China opportunity that we had. mean, a lot of people try to compare it to the Japanese opportunity there in the particularly in the 80s, and that fell apart in the early 90s. And the Japanese market got to almost about 800,000 visitors, and then it tanked, although it's actually sort of got back to around 550, 580,000, I think, before COVID. So there was a long road back. So I think there were some skeptics around China in the early days, but it was just there's been such a connectivity between China and Australia. It goes all the way back to the gold rush days. So if you study your history, the Chinese have always been very interested in Australia. Some would skeptically say too interested, but again, I'm not going to play into the politics too much. But yeah, so in terms of addressing that question directly, Tourism Australia have a suite of markets that they look at. Right? Obviously Central Europe, Eastern, Western Europe. Sorry, not Eastern, Western Europe. Obviously, there's a variety of markets through Asia, Southeast Asia, and North Asia, and then they have an Americas strategy, and New Zealand keeps ticking over. And the political answer is that we've always had a suite of markets. I think the reality is our international market very much heavily leaned into China, and it leaned into us. And then in more recent years, the US and to some degree Singapore, Japan really did start to come on. And UK, it's always sort of sat there and gone okay, but it hasn't been probably as dynamic as it has in recent years. So moving forward, yeah, look, I think we do have a broader suite of markets. I think probably the biggest learning out of COVID, that's for those businesses that actually have a business off the back of all of this, and obviously many won't, but many hopefully will still do, is diversity of customer is obviously key, but you don't knock back the business to have a diverse book of customers. I think you've just got to, it's just try to hedge your arrangements as best you can. I think it's important that Australian tourism businesses work on that domestic market. The domestic market at the end of the day has always may not be high value per pax, but it's certainly a high value collective market, and particularly in the current environment, it's going to remain a very strong market. And I think internationally, I don't think people should be scared off international. I think in due course it'll come back, and we should remember that the rest of the world looks at Australia, looks at the Aussies and go, they basically don't have COVID. So, and New Zealand as well. So we think there's a huge impact of the pandemic that it has because of the health-related response. But check out what's going on in the UK. Check out what's going on in the US. Check out what's going on in South America and so forth. I mean, they look at us and go, what are you talking about? So I think we need to embrace the fact that when the borders do start to reopen, I think we will start to see tourists coming back. Part of it will be carriers' preparedness to operate suboptimal loads, and what are going to be the restrictions from a market point of view as well as an access point of view. So as I said, I'm pretty optimistic that we're going to start to see some numbers come back in for obvious reasons. There's a whole bunch of people with itchy feet who just want to get out and travel, and they'll suck up the virus because it's maybe their last trip, or I think, well, what the heck, after what they've been through.
That is so true, that although even here in Victoria, where we both live, yeah, it's quite dire compared to other parts of the country. But when you look at internationally, yeah, we're living the dream. We are living the dream.
One of my homeschoolers here, which is not going to come in the camera, so sorry.
Yeah, that's all right. Because even back in my early days of heading into international and inbound marketing, New Zealand was it, like our international market. From my background in hot air ballooning, that was the China back then. So yeah. I'm no Nostradamus, and I know nothing about nothing, but I see as a starting point, because then that dropped off when I came back into a tour operation like global, where our Western markets were the international market and a really high local and domestic market. I had a 5-year break and come back, and it was China. Like more than half of our business was a Chinese market. But then where's New Zealand gone? It had completely dropped off. And I think if I'd looked into it high enough, is it because it's almost become like another state to our economy? It was just something, it was a product and a market. But I guess in the same way, focus grows where focus goes, and I guess all of our focus did go into really growing and supporting that Chinese market.
Yeah,
And
I think. I mean, New Zealand's an interesting one. I'll be frank with you. I think as a strategy as a nation and the way we looked at the Kiwi market, I think we've done ourselves a bit of a disservice, quite frankly. There's actually great differences between Australia and New Zealand. I know, they're in our constitution and they flog us at rugby, and we flog them at most other things. And there's a huge chip on the Kiwi shoulder when they look at Aussie and vis-a-vis. And I actually don't think a lot of Australians truly get New Zealand. A lot of Australians, a lot of my bugger mates get Queenstown. I don't blame them. It's a cracking place. But in the South Island, it's a beautiful part of the world. But and I'm not that good a skier. But I guess, I don't want to get too distracted by the beauty of Queenstown. The issue, I think, is, though, that I don't think Australian tourism, and I could be a bit controversial saying this, have truly invested in that market in a smart enough way. We have treated it a bit like another state of Australia. We've sort of treated it like a domestic offering. It's had a very large VFR component and a bit of an events component and a pretty large business component. So you see a lot of business traffic flicking back and forward. There's some head office connectivity, particularly with some of the New Zealand companies, and they have Auckland head offices and so forth. So, yeah, look, I think New Zealand actually is a real good opportunity for us. A lot of skeptics say, forget it, it's just a VFR market and it'll never be anything more. But I'm not so sure. I think this new world might change it up a little bit. I think as an Australian, it's presented itself a bit differently to New Zealand. I mean, we don't have a Queenstown in terms of the ski fields, but by geez, we've got plenty of other offerings that I think are equally, if not more, compelling. So, I just think we've just got to reframe a market like that. And I think that question earlier was fantastic. We do need to, I think we're reframing ourselves in the US. We definitely were reframing ourselves into Japan, been a lot more sophisticated with the Japanese market. And I think you look at the very slick parts of Southeast Asia, Singapore. We've seen the movie, so that was an ad for Singapore, wasn't it? Obviously, they actually invested as much as the tourism promotion as anything, apart from being an amazing movie. And I think we all got a bit weepy during the wedding scene. I guess trying to show my soft side, but I think the point. I think the point of all of that is, I think we need to think about what those opportunities are. And I'm actually a bit of a believer in Indonesia, particularly Jakarta. So I think that there is so much wealth in Jakarta, and all the wealthy families in Jakarta, a lot of them have their children educated in Australia. And Bali is Jakarta's playground. Well, I think there's no reason why, West Coast Australia, even the East Coast of Australia, why in our lifetime that Indonesia, or particularly Jakarta, doesn't become a much bigger inbound market for us. But we've got to address the complexities of the offering and ensure that we meet that for those families who want to believe they're getting a good quintessential experience in.
Something I read about, and correct me if I'm wrong, something that really supported business as we now go back to our planning for the future and re-entering international markets. The EMDG, the Export Marketing Development Grant, that is a huge support for business. I heard that's been scratched. Is that right? Can you talk to that at all?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. I can't talk to all the specifics. I was on a industry call earlier in the week, and one of the senior bureaucrats was talking about some enhancements to the EMDG program. So, no, it's definitely going to be around. There's a change up happening in the program. I'm sounding like an expert, and I'm not on this, but there'll be some change ups and some new iteration of the program kicking in, I think, 1st of July 2021. So, no, the EMDG Export Market Development Grants are very coalition governments very engaged in these. Minister Birmingham has announced enhancements to the program. So no, I think it's I think they're good opportunities there. And as I understand, the department is Minister Birmingham's department. They're very keen to see tourism, the visitor economy, businesses associated in that really look to use the EMDGs as best as they possibly can. So I think, work with the likes of Austrade. They're a very good organisation. They're big, like all these organisations, but I think they are passionate about trying to work with businesses that see an export orientation.
Oh, look, that's what I'd love to see. And it was a thought, even before this had come, I thought, well, what would be great down the track is, say, an established international business that has exhausted their export market development grant, because it goes over a period of 5 to 8 years, that you could have an opportunity to start again, because you can't go back and use that again. But if you're it's almost a restart completely into the market. So if that conversation conversation comes up around the table, you're sitting closer to that. I thought, where would you even flag that, or would you go to say, for someone that's invested in international from a grassroots local business that entered into international, and it was only available through a grant like that, to re-enter again now after a COVID situation? That would be really helpful again, to go through that and not be discounted because you've already had that assistance. I would love that for businesses to be looked at differently. Daniel, I just wanted to make that as a passing comment.
That's a great piece of feedback. And I think my understanding is that the grants are going to be even more focused on the industry and tourism players. Look, in terms of reapplying or getting a new grant, I think, I'm happy to take that on board and have a look and see if that's that's good public policy to push forward. I'm advocating good public policy, and we innovated some stuff at Tourism Australia during my time there around new funding models for TA. So I absolutely, I think we've got to look at rebirthing as much as possible. I mean, not every business is going to be internationally focused, and we've got to remember that. And I think part of the issue with tourism is we're so broad in terms of the different types of businesses, and can get a little bit too caught up sometimes in some parts of the sector more than others. I think it's predominantly a domestic, a lot of intrastate, but predominantly a domestic interstate with decent yieldies. And then obviously international, it's pockets of it. And in fact, in some parts of the country, it's very high reliance on the international dollar. And let's hope that comes back and allows people to give that wonderful opportunity to seek out both markets.
And that's what's great. And I guess, again, with your policy and advocacy and your government relations role, is also, it's been lovely to see in this last round of funding, to see tour operators also get a look in for, as a segment, because I know in the funding, particularly when I was in the thick of it, when you see, and we spoke about this briefly, in that accommodation operators could go, had support in their refunds, that they could receive refund for the loss of bookings. Particularly here, I'm speaking specific for Victoria now, but operators and attractions that have really hemorrhaged through this as well didn't have the same opportunity, or were looked at, were excluded in that. With that hat on, how do you, I guess these decisions are made, but it's impossible to reverse or get a look in when they're published, and you say, hey, wait a second, what about us? What would you advise for a small business to do to have their voice heard? Is it just like reach out to the tourism council? Is it go and petition? Does that ever happen? Have you seen that happen in your lifetime, when the decisions are made like that, and businesses having their voice heard to say, what about us? What about our little niche industry that have been forgotten in this?
That's a deep question to spin, so let me have a go. So I think if I was operating small business today in a pretty dynamic sector like tourism, there's a few things I think you need to do. Obviously, you live and breathe your business, but I think in terms of advocacy for yourself, I think you should join an industry organisation and check out to make sure that they have their smarts about them in terms of how they engage at a local government, state government, and they have some federated model which could be of value. I think it's actually really important for you as a business person to get to know your local member of parliament, both state and federal. It sounds very twee. Can I say it could be one of the best investments of half an hour you'll have. Having worked for both state and federal politicians over the years, I don't want to deal with any banter around politicians, but can I say people that generally come in to talk to a politician and don't want to whinge and complain about something, about the electricity companies cut off my power, or I've got an immigration problem, whatever. If they've actually come with a positive rather than a negative, they embrace it, and it's important that I think that small business people and tourism people talk to their elected members of parliament. I think one of my biggest concerns through this whole crisis has been a little bit of a lack of understanding about how the visitor economy truly works. I think governments of all colours, and state, federal and the like, have tried really hard to best support our industry as well as a bunch of others. It's been a terrible time. I mean, the tourism industry is more than halved in value, economic value, in 8 months. I mean, it's unprecedented, right? You may as well just dropped a bomb. But the problem is you've got some politicians and some bureaucrats, particularly bureaucrats, who talk like they know how to run a tourism business, and they always bang on like they know what the cash flow is, they know what the problems are, they know, and the invoice terms, and they sort of bang on like they know what they're talking about, and I actually don't think they do. And I've been, probably I'm sounding a bit forward, and I was a bit forward in a number of these meetings, saying it's actually not, well, how you're describing the industry is actually not how it truly operates. So a huge light bulb moment for me has been that small businesses collectively just need to get their smarts together and get really sharp on the advocacy and really explain to their elected members and the bureaucracy, particularly the bureaucracy, how a business really operates. I think that's a really big issue, and then that transcends to a whole bunch of other things. So yeah, and look on quickly on operate tours and experiences. Look, they have really suffered. I mean, even we tend to, as doing domestic travel, we tend to not do tours and experiences so much, particularly if we're close to home. Obviously, if you're doing interstate travel, it's a bit different, and international visitors are more into these things. So they are really struggling. We're trying some last-minute advocacy to try to get some extra awareness and assistance for that. I think it's going to take a little bit of time, but you're not forgotten, and we appreciate. We know it's a real strain.
Oh, look, I see even for the Victoria Felicia Mariani, the Victorian Tourism Industry Council, she has been like, if I'm going to look back and think of leadership for our industry, for our state, she's been an incredible, just an incredible, I guess, support and in her communications. And you're right on. It wasn't until the other day someone mentioned the tourism minister. Now, as someone that has had little interest in politics, if anything that COVID has brought out in me is like I've got to get, it's brought a deep interest in how does all of this work and how are decisions made and how are people that I think are at the table making these decisions finding out in the age what is given to our industry in the same way that I'm finding out. That's just something that I've discovered over this time. It's like, well, that's, what's there? And I had to think, okay, who is our minister again? Not to say I'm just putting this, that's again in exactly what you said in terms of having being closely connected, not only to your tourism industry council, but your local parliament and also to the tourism minister's office. So that's just something that, that's important feedback that you've just given for businesses at the moment that are looking at their way out of this. Now, to finish off just on this with your strategic mind, and you just touched on it, if you were a tourism business right now and you did have an international market and didn't dabble too much into a domestic market and feeling complete sense of overwhelm. Now, small business, if it's something that I help businesses every day, is helping them bring back to a plan and having a strategic thought process rather than being by the by. And that's what we're seeing at the moment too, that business is just something that came naturally and evolved naturally. Their revenue stream, that wasn't something that you can't just plan for the next 2-3 months now. Like, we have to look beyond that. And there could be, I like this term a colleague said the other day, we're there's a sugar rush coming for the industry, but we have to look beyond that to something that's more sustainable for us. What's some strategic advice that you would give to businesses if this was you at the moment in a small tour, as a small to medium enterprise in tourism? How would you approach a strategic way forward?
Sure. Look, I think I've run my own consultancy, but it was a micro consultancy, so maybe I'm probably well equipped to answer this, because a lot of tourism businesses only have me, myself, and I, and a couple of others employed. But no, I think I'd probably give a few takeouts here. Firstly, wind yourself back pre-COVID. So at the end of 2019, we had record, according to the federal data and the state data, we had record levels of domestic spending. We had record levels of international inbound spending. We also had record levels of Aussies external spending travelling abroad. So what does all that say? It says that once things get to a level of normality, people will travel and people will want to engage in leisure activities. I don't think that's going to really change, to be honest. 5 years of basically real wage freezes in this country still saw households, if anything, grow the percentage of spend that they did in terms of travel, tourism, not reduce, and that's kind of it's kind of flips on itself. So I think that's the first thing. I think the other really important things is look at your market and look at your customer base and where it's at and where you think it's going to go to. And I think the other important thing is look around at your competitors, because I think the one thing in Australian business that's often happened is if someone does a great thing really well, someone down the road will ape it, then the third person and the fourth person will ape it. So I think you've got to sort of, you've got to be nimble enough to keep thinking that through. I personally think as Australian tourism business moving forward, you've got to have a domestic audience. I think that's it's patently clear. And it's the core of our industry, and I think it's a core market. Now, I know that means that the offering can be quite different between that and a returning international visitor, and depends where you're based and where you're exposed and so forth. But I think you need to think long and hard about that. I think you also need to think a little bit about what's the domestic aviation industry going to be doing, or the transport sector going to be doing in the next 3 to 5 years. They're going to take time to rebuild. Be it in terms of domestic travel, in terms of interstate air travel. At the moment, it's down almost 95%. COVID's been around for a few months now. Some of the borders are reopened and no one's flying. So I just think that's a bit of an omen that's going to take a while to come back. But I think so I think you've got to think about that. I think the final point of view is just believe in your product and believe in you and believe in your customer service. I think customer service doesn't cost a lot to do well. I actually think that's the key to a lot of this, is just having really good, the best product offering you can do, have the best service offering around that. And then I guess my final piece of advice, and obviously the trends move dramatically with COVID, is around your digital platform and the online promotion of you, the acceptance of bookings and so forth. I cannot stress enough the move to digital. If it wasn't already inevitable, it's absolutely happening now. Bricks and mortar basically is dead. You've got to have a fantastic digital channel, and importantly, having control over the booking channel or whatever that you have around that, and having a good booking engine and so forth. I know there's costs associated, but if you're believing that channel is developing numbers for you, you've got to make sure that's working in sync. I've probably thrown a few things out there, but I think if you've got a good product, you've got a good idea, you think you've got a market that's going to work with, then you've got to look at just some of those macro settings around it. But I'm a big believer. I think Aussies will absolutely travel in big numbers again. And importantly, they may do it more in their own country because they can't chuff off to Aspen or Queenstown or get across to Bali and so forth in the numbers they wanted to. So you've got to take advantage of that opportunity.
Oh, that is excellent. There's your strategy right there. For anyone that's listening, that is excellent advice. What a great thing to, if you haven't been looking at it. And also, I mean, a lot of accreditation, like we see through ATEC and the Quality Tourism Framework, if that's something that you haven't had the opportunity to get around to that, I hope Erin and the team, all the ticks around the country have been slammed with accreditation applications at the moment. I would think this would have been a great time to also get those things, get their real tourism excellence on.
It's not sexy, this stuff, but it's really critical. And why it's important is it gives you a framework to go back to. That's what we call it, Quality Tourism Framework. It gives you a framework around where your business is at. And it also allows you to punch holes in where you see weaknesses in your business. Now, look, I'm probably a fairly basic strategist. So I'm a big believer in SWOTs: strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, threats. Now, you can do it against yourself, you can do it against your household, you can do it against your business, you can do it against your suburb if you like, and I think they're very healthy things to do by yourself as an owner of a business, let alone getting some of your team around and getting a sense check to see if that's working. And I just think you've got to spend that little bit of time around where you think the business is heading and where it's going to go. And I think the other thing I've been thinking a bit about this is if it's not working, if your market's not working, you've got to change it. And you've got to be pretty nimble these days and move pretty quickly. And you can have a great business plan, you can have a great strategy, but if the strategy is not working, it might be them, not you, but you've got to do something about that. And which is why it's sad that we've had all these businesses that strategically went down the pathway of serving the China market and did really well out of it, but they didn't have a second or a third gear to pull or lever to pull, and that fell away. I mean, surely there should have been some alarm bells as well going. How can we get more of a domestic business going, or how can we get some Koreans, or we know there's German backpackers coming into town. We've got to make sure we get a few of them coming along, and perhaps some of these businesses did, but I mean, the lure of that Chinese dollar and the fact they were, very strong tourists, they actually wanted to tour and experience things. I can see why so many businesses moved that way. And let's hope that comes back, because if we don't have that Chinese market back to where it sort of was, I mean, it's going to be a long rebuild of the international offering that we have. And a lot of businesses obviously going to have to change up or change out, sadly. I'm being a realist, but I think that's the sad situation, regrettably, that we have with respect to the international market anyway.
Oh, absolutely. It is what it is. And I think that is absolutely that. Have your strategy, have your plan. And if anything that this experience has taught all of us is asking that what if this went tomorrow, because now we can see the reality that these things can happen because no risk management plan, even through the, has a pandemic on there.
Probably as a final insight, I mean, it was always in the risk register. A major virus outbreak, a pandemic, was always seen as probably one of the two top greatest risks outside of terrorism, and probably the other one was bird flu in terms of impacting Australian tourism. And it's funny, those risk registers over the years. I think it sort of got pushed down the list a little bit. Now, I don't think we could have combated COVID much differently, to be honest. I mean, we shut the border to China as quickly as almost anybody. There was a lot of pressure on the government at the time to do it, and then people read into the politics of it. And I mean, my gosh, imagine if they didn't shut it when they did. I mean, it would have probably been a lot worse. So it's a difficult one, and it's just the nature of our industry. It's obviously exposed to a demand cycle, and you've obviously got to do supply to meet that. So fingers crossed. Absolutely. I think it'll come back in some way, and let's hope it's a strong industry, and importantly for younger people too, that they see it as an industry. I think one of the things I want to try to give back over the next few years that I'm around in it is just trying to encourage people to get involved in it. I think it's a really great industry, and it's pure delivery of often passion and product to deliver an outcome. So, and people actually want to come along and experience it. So I think it's tremendous, and not a lot of industries can deliver that. And look, it's good after dinner conversation too. Everyone's got a view on tourism. So
everyone's got a view on tourism, and I love this is exactly how we met a few weeks ago. Even for the young tourism professionals that are following a career path, I would hate for anyone to be going and regretting the decision of choosing tourism as a career pathway, because it is a wonderful industry. It will bounce back, and as you said, it's filled with passionate people that are always giving of their time, and we'll get without. We are stronger together. We always have been. That's our success as an industry globally has been our collaborative spirit to be able to share the successes, but also get through the challenging times. Oh, I could keep going and going, but I know it's getting there's we have to start wrapping up. But I want to just finish up on you and your a little bit about how you roll, Simon. What's the best advice that you've ever received
Oh my gosh.
in your excellence round? This is about you now.
Oh my gosh. Okay. Well, I took a good advice from my cricket coach at a younger age, and so because I used to be a reasonable medium pacer, and I bowled much better muck around leg spin in the nets even as a 9 and 10-year-old. So I became a leg spinner for the next 15 years. So that was good advice. So it kept me in cricket for a lot longer than probably I was going to, because I wasn't going to become a 6'4", bustling in aggressive fast bowler. No, I think. Well, that's a good question. Look, I think, you know what, I think the best advice is, to be frank, is do follow. It sounds a bit cliche, but really do follow your passions and your passion points and your interests. I think with work, I mean, this whole live to work, not work to live type of thing. I think, working to live is actually really what it's more likely about. And obviously, we've gone through this situation, and I think in Victorians, we're all in this together. We've had a different perspective, but I think. I think if you're not doing something that you're really interested in or passionate about, it doesn't matter what the pay is or what the perks are. I think ultimately you'll become quite dissatisfied. I think all the research is showing that people will do a number of different careers across their journey, and I think, and in a way, I think that's why I think this is an interesting industry, because a lot of people have probably fallen into tourism, and a lot of stuck, for some have moved on. But I think that's why people tend to stick in it and get into it, and if they enjoy it. So I think you just got to enjoy what you do to the best of your ability, because life's pretty short, and you have these changes. So I think that's really good. Personally, I think it's advice I've tried to give to my kids. Sorry, the door keeps opening. My young one, but I think it's you do things that you'll always do better at something that you're passionate about. So find your passion points, find what really turns you on, and go for that. And I think that's probably the advice I can, with a few grey hairs now, I can give to people. And it doesn't always work out, but I think you do have to chase your dreams a little bit, particularly when you're younger, because that's when you can do it, and be prepared to do different things and go into different industries or work for different places. But I think, that's probably that would be my advice.
Following the feeling always works, doesn't it? If something feels good, keep pursuing that. I think that's great advice. Now, you do a lot of things. With your strategic work, working at Royce.com, and the work that you're doing at a really high level at ATIC, what are some of your personal habits that contribute to your success? What are some things that you do that in your daily habits that you think contribute to managing multiple different roles and responsibilities, personally and professionally, that you could share with us?
Yeah, that's a lovely question. So look, personally, I try to stay as fit as I can. I used to be a bit of an animal about wanting to be super fit, and was for a long time, and I had a couple of bad injuries, and it sort of slowed myself up, and I've changed tack a little bit. But I like to keep my core fitness up, and even just walking, to be honest. I mean, I do probably more walking than anything now, but I've made sure I've kept my cricket skills up, and I can kick a footy ball a reasonable way as well, because my son in particular is passionate about his footy and cricket, so I've got to be able to hold up with him. I think some personal, so that's that. I think family is very important to me, and just some basic stuff. I know it sounds, again, very cliche, but to be honest, love nothing better than I'm always the first up, getting the kids sorted, getting some breakfast for them, and getting them on their way, and just checking in with them and seeing how they are. To me, those are the sort of things that rolls me into the day quite well. I've had to do a lot of travel in my life, and I love travel I love travel, so I've worked in the industry, but it can get very grinding, and I always used to miss the fact I'd be on a 6 o'clock flight and not getting the kids some way sorted, always rub their head in the morning. And I was a massive believer of always trying to get home at night, even if I took a red eye home. I probably more prefer to be sleeping in my own bed than a hotel. So the hotel industry won't want to hear this, but that's always sort of how I've sort of tended to roll. I read. I don't read anywhere as much as I should of novels and stuff, but I do try to read some news sites pretty regularly, at least check in 2 or 3 times a day. I've become a bit of an aficionado in swatting up in LinkedIn. I found that's an amazing platform. You can read lots of insights. There's a lot of self-congratulatory stuff, but it's also a lot of really interesting insights. And I found through COVID, I've found a lot of really interesting people as you put stuff out and they shoot stuff back. And so I found that to be a really good platform. The other thing I think is I've tried to, over the years, try to knock around and hang with more positive people as much as possible. I think you can get a bit negative people weigh you down, and I do try to work in a more positive framework as much as possible, not to not deal with the serious issues that come before you, but I think it's always important to have positive, healthy relationships and hang out with positive people and be a positive person as much as possible. I think if we're all more positive about the world, somehow it may end up turning out to be a slightly better place. So, again, it's probably the altruism in me, but which is why I came back to that earlier statement around know your local member of parliament. Actually think about it, and it's not about the politics of it. Just find the good in them and get them to work for you because they're your elected member. And I just think too many people are ignorant of the fact there's a democratic political process which just buzzes around them, and it's all political. I don't need to know about it. Well, you do, because your taxes are paying for the whole thing, and you have an opportunity to influence and get your message across. So look, I think that's some of the stuff, and I say that to everybody. If you're bitching and moaning about politics, well, get to know a politician and make a difference. Don't just bitch and moan if you want, but just keep it on Talkback Radio. I don't really want to hear you moaning if you're not going to make a contribution to try to change it.
Oh, I hear you. So good. How have I not met Simon before? Since we met on that panel, how have I not met Simon before? So good. Your book, now just, do you have a favorite that you would like to share? Is there a book that has made a profound difference in your life that comes top of mind?
But I'm flipping out the cliches. I'm not the biggest reader, to be honest. Look, I mean, it's funny because at school I didn't read a lot, and I had a couple of really quite insightful English teachers who got me to read different things that the others weren't. So country kid that much prefer to be outside. But I actually really enjoyed Huck Finn and Tom Sawyer. They were probably my first really engaged books, and I really did enjoy To Kill a Mockingbird. I know it's very cliche, but it's an amazing book, and I've had all my kids read that. Look, I love political books, to be honest, and look, it's probably I'm not really defined by reading, to be honest. I mean, I've read. My wife thinks I never read, but I actually do read a bit. But yeah, look, and to be honest, I actually really like reading about business people as well. I must admit those books around the rise and fall of Alan Bond, amazing book about a amazing criminal businessman, obviously, but the fact that someone like Alan Bond got to where he got to was pretty amazing. So books like that I find really, really quite interesting, just how these people get to where they get to. And there's a piece in these people that is not very nice, but they become successful and they define and change things. So the books about Kerry Packer I thought were very fascinating as well. So yeah, that's me, but you're more likely to catch me reading The Australian and maybe The Racing Guide sometimes, and reading new books.
The final question: your ultimate holiday. What does the ultimate what's the first holiday that you're looking forward to planning? And I know it will involve your family as a family man, or maybe something with you and your wife. What are you looking forward to experiencing when we come out of this?
Yeah, it's a great question. Look, I've been ranting a bit about Queensland, but I must admit, we love Noosa, and the sunny coast area a lot. So we've had some good memories there. So I think that's where we are. I don't think we're going to be going internationally for a long time, but that's okay. I think it's probably that would be great to spend some time not too crowded in Noosa would be pretty fab. I'd love to get everyone back down to Tassie, do Tassie really properly. spend some time in Freycinet, that would be fabulous. Yeah, look, I'm pretty keen to get. My kids have seen a fair bit of Australia, and I've seen a lot of it. I'd like to spend. I'd love to get back to Broome. We did a family gig up there last year for 10 days, and it was arguably our best ever family holiday. And
Wow.
I just think Broome's a really amazing, long way away from the East Coast, but I think it's a really amazing, very quintessential holiday, really, and break. And I think Broome's a really impressive part of our offering. So yeah, look, they're probably just a few sort of places off the top of mind. But Portsea Pub would be all right too, but we're not allowed out of Melbourne.
Yeah, yeah. Well, there's some great holiday inspiration. Simon, thank you so much. We will add people to follow you and your journey. Would LinkedIn be the best platform for you to add into our show notes
Yeah, I think so.
to connect with you?
You can see me on LinkedIn, and it's all right. You don't have to agree with everything I put out there. I try to be very apolitical as much as possible. So I've a bit of a bent on hashtag borders. So I'll stay on the consistency because I think we're on the side of right on that one. But yeah, no, every now and then I'll throw in. I find that humour doesn't work that well on LinkedIn. So I put a couple of funny. I put a funny one up about a border incident in Wodonga involving a man holding a can of VB, and no one really liked it. I thought it was very funny, but anyway, but no, you can find me there, absolutely, and I'm keen to follow you as keen to follow those that are keen to follow me as well. I think sharing insights is really important, and all the best with the program. It's great to see people talking about this great industry of tourism, and I think it's important to really get into the granular of it a little bit as well. There's a lot of bull dust spoken about it, but there's also a lot of stuff, a lot of truisms in it as well, which keep coming through. And we just got to make sure we just keep it front and center about what the issues are, but also what the opportunities are as well. I think it's important. We've got to talk as positive as we can about the future, as much as it's pretty crap at the moment. We've got to keep talking about what that positive future can look like, because regulators and governments and so forth want to hear about the positives. Of course they do, but and show them how we can get there. So, and thanks for the opportunity to come on your program. So.
Oh, thank you. It's been a pleasure, and thank you for staying on with us. I have key takeaways to share with everyone that's listening as a summary, certainly from keep it positive. Surround yourself with positive people from a business strategic point of view. Just some insights from Simon that he's shared. Look at your market, look at your competitors, really be driving forward for the next little while, looking at a domestic audience as your core market. Look at what the domestic aviation industry is doing as a collective. Keep your fingers on the pulse on that. And absolutely, I love you said, believe in what you're doing, believe in your product, believe in the service that you offer and the experience that you offer. And certainly something that's dear to my heart is get your digital on. Look at your platforms, look at your call to actions, look at the usability of the visitor experience before they come and join you. What's the experience like for a visitor when they're coming onto your website? Use this time really well to polish that. And certainly a key takeaway, I want to know my local member of parliament and go and say thank you for what you're doing, because it must be a really tough job at the moment for our local politicians and beyond. That's something I would look to tomorrow, actually. And if all of this is not working, be nimble enough to change it up. Just we're in a testing environment at the moment, aren't we? It's all experiment and keep doing what's working and change what isn't. What an incredible guest we've had, and so much insight and learning. Simon, very grateful. Thank you so much. And thank you to everyone that's joined us on another fantastic episode. And until next time, my friends, I hope you're filled up with optimism for the future for tourism. I sure am. And I've got things to add, destinations around the country to add to my bucket list to go with my family as well. So I love that share at the end. My friends, if you're listening, head over to the Tourism Hub podcast, subscribe to have a listen to this if you haven't had a chance to listen to the entire conversation. And until next time, be excellent today and every single day. Until next time, you got this. Bye for now. Thanks again for joining us on the Tourism Hub podcast. If you found this podcast valuable, it will mean the world to give us a review on Apple iTunes. We're also live here every Saturday at 2 p.m. across all the Institute of Excellence Facebook and YouTube channels. And you are all invited. Be excellent, and don't forget we also have courses available at instituteofexcellence.com to help you and your small business greatness.